Welcome to the Understanding Projects podcast. This is Dave Barrett. My discussion today is with Don Kaluzny. I've worked with Don for a few years now, and we co-teach a number of engineering project management degree courses. Don has a wide range of experience in what I'll call large-scale engineering projects and installations. He also developed the ebook, Make Your Own Robot Move. During our discussion, we covered a wide range of topics, including the challenges of managing large-scale projects, including the assessment of risk and achieving quality. We talked about the differences and challenges of being involved in military projects, and some thoughts about how the size of organizations impacts projects. Here is my discussion with Don Kaluzny. So Don, in terms of us talking beforehand and so on, and knowing things about your background, you've had a lot of experience in what I'll consider, larger scale projects, infrastructure, military, power plants, and so on. And it's a really interesting area of project management on really what I'll refer to as kind of big things. And so what I was looking today was to talk to you just a little bit around your experience with that. How do you approach those projects? What do you do? What are the risks? How do you handle them and so on? So with that, I'll just turn it over to you how do you approach, you're working on a big, super large projects. What have you done in the past to sort of, start those off or get those going?
Well, the projects are usually long lead. So you're usually dealing with a customer for several years before a request for proposal is issued. So you've had some time to assess, do you have the capacity? Do you have the team members capable of doing the job? And do you have the bandwidth to do it? And understanding that when you're dealing with infrastructure projects, there's a long lead time. It takes years for these contracts. And before, so you're looking at minimum 5 years of kind of around the coffee table chatting, hey, this would be really nice if we built this. Yeah, it'd be really nice if we built it for you. It could be from one that you get the RFP, it could be another year or two before you actually submit a proposal. And then it could be another 5 years before shovels go in ground and 15 years before the facility is operating. So you're balancing so many things at once. But where we ended up diverging about 2000 in the industry was in doing more service work, refurbishments, decommissioning. On the military side, there's always unique projects working there, and you've got to constantly just keeping your ear to the ground, and no matter what industry you're in. I don't care if you're working, retail, fast food, high tech. Startup, whatever, you're in the relationship business. Right. And if people don't trust you, you're not going to get the work.
Right. So at any one time, this is a very long process that you're describing. Like you're saying it, I don't know, I didn't count up all the years there, but it sounds like there's a decade involved there, yeah. At least from in some cases. How many of these things are on the go at the same time? Like, are you, have you been in the process of, you've got, a few of these percolating in the background, but you're currently working on something? Like, what fills your day, or what has filled your day in those types of environments?
Well, essentially at any given time, we'd have between $9 and $10 billion of work in the portfolio. So there's a lot going on.
Right.
There's not just a single project going on. There's probably about 30 at various stages. You have maybe 6 or 7 truly active at various stages. So, and that allows you to move resources and work with your partner organizations to kind of shift the load from, the term that we use is engineering, procurement, construction, project management, EPCM.
Right.
And so you have your construction organizations that you work with globally. Well, they can move around for you. You've got your procurement and supply chain. I mean, that's a huge logistics. I mean, the coolest thing I ever got to see was the, stuff offloaded from the Antonov at Toronto Pearson.
Right.
An amazing thing. we're shipping things all over the world and working to multiple jurisdictions. Like in the industries I dealt with, the quality requirements actually are embedded in national statutes. So you got to behave yourself.
Right.
So there's always something new. And, you know, you look at some of the cool things like early 2000s, we were bidding on the ITER project, the International Fusion Facility. We were actually trying to bring that to Canada. And that was kind of a unique thing because we had many discussions with our national regulator, the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission at the time. And I mean, it was really exciting, but there was always something doing. And in spite of the global financial downturn in 2008, there was still lots of work out there. You just had to look for it.
Right, right. So it sounds like you were involved, your experience was involved in a fair degree of, like you mentioned, stakeholder relationships, of course, that's key. And I've yet to find a project where that isn't. So whether it's a small project or big project or everything in between, that it is all about those relationships. So also true on large projects. So that's good. But it sounds like your role or involvement was heavy procurement, like you're working with a lot of different organizations to bring these together. Was there, in your organization, were you also developing, you're like also developing products and services along with the other organizations that you were procuring from? Like, was it, were you on both sides of the creation ledger, if we call it that way?
I'd like to think so. Like when you look at one of the big things in heavy construction is crane lifts, like using heavy cranes. So on large project, every time there's a large project, there's a heaviest lift in the world.
Right.
And that title is good for about 6 months. And when you think about some of the things and the machinery we have capable of lifting these huge structures, and the time it saves from, and the time it saves from fabricating things at elevation, and also the safety factor, it's a lot nicer to work, 30 feet off the ground versus 400 feet. I mean, people on the ground think, oh, there's hardly a breeze, but when you get 300-400 feet up, there is a bit of a gale.
Yeah.
But so in some cases, there's certain adaptations of new technology or establish or new processes and techniques to try and either make something more efficient, or just, a lot of times it's focused on safety, trying to make it so it's easier to do, less disruption to the other organizations or other infrastructure around us. So yeah, I'd like to think we're on both sides. But I'm kind of an old guy, we just went and did our job. We weren't posting things on TikTok or whatever, Instagram saying, hey, look what we did. We just did it.
Yes. There was you were of that just do it sort of mantra.
Yeah.
Was there a great focus on, like, on that note of, we just did our job and do it? Would you say the project management was more, was it more, say, process, like specific process related, I'll use PMI's, methodology as an example, or do you think it was more, and I don't know the right words to use, but more just the kind of old school, we just did what makes sense at the time, like more homegrown sort of methods, or somewhere in between? Do you know what I mean on that?
Yeah, well, I think what you're looking at is the evolution of process here, Dave.
Right.
I mean, initially it was, we know what we're doing, and we made a lot of mistakes.
Right.
I remember when the Project Management Institute was a little known for-profit organization in the US. And we kind of laughed when we first heard about it. This is 30 years ago. And we were young and foolish. But what they've done is they've taken a systematic approach to managing projects that looks at all aspects. Your course, an introductory course, looks at all aspects. Mm-hmm. Each of those chapters could be a course unto its own later on, but it introduces all the flavors of everything. And that's the biggest mistake a lot of people make when they get into project management, is they focus on only one thing. The most important thing for me is reporting to my sponsor, because my bonus is on the line. Most important thing for me is my team to love me. Most important thing for me is my customer likes me. It's all important. I
Right.
mean, and depending on the nature of the project too, like you can have certain like large scale infrastructure projects where you're going to have a very systematic, very careful waterfall type plan. Or if you're doing development work, and I've heard skunk works, is where agile came out of. It's
Right.
used often in IT development too. And on the IT side, dealt with software work for the control systems of nuclear power plants, and the verification validation processes are really, really, really strict. Protocols are amazing. But again, in that environment where you're doing, any kind of something really, really leading edge, you've got to kind of go away from the structure and think more towards a flexible kind of different way of measuring success, different support structure. So I've truly seen, the standard, traditional, and agile and hybrids work really well.
Right.
Unfortunately, I've also seen things fail horribly too.
Well, yeah, I'm trying to think in terms of you. I know you've mentioned you've worked with nuclear things and then fail horribly. I'm just hoping that those aren't both.
Oh no, those ones we can't.
Yeah. How do you, and speaking of that, I mean, you mentioned the chapters of the text and so on. One of them is around risk. There is a part that's a definite constraint of project management is risk and so on. You must have a unique or a certain view of risk having worked on projects like that. If you're talking about infrastructure, nuclear power plants, military, risk must be front and center in your mind. I'm kind of thinking,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
How do you look at it? What is your approach? And I know it's a big question, but what do you do about risk? What's your approach?
Again, it depends on the nature of the project. In some
Yeah.
cases, first and foremost is financial risk to the organization. You don't want to lose the entire organization on one bad project. You've got to consider capability. You've got to consider stability of your customer. Can they pay? Technology. What's the state of technology? Does it support what you need to accomplish? Safety. To me, I don't care if you're doing, some kind of nuclear project or a loading dock addition to a warehouse. If you're not taking care of the safety of the people around it, safety of the people affecting it, there will be a risk there. And it's huge nowadays for construction organizations. What they pay for WSIB premiums are some of the highest in the province. And there's a reason for it, because there's a huge risk of claims. Typically what we'll do is on a certain project is through discussions with customer prior to RFP or even at the RFP stage, we'll sit down and look at everything. We'll create a matrix, and we'll use our best judgment to generate some sort of weight factor for each of the criteria. And sometimes the equations become a little complex, and we rely on software to crunch the numbers for us.
Right.
And if the numbers are acceptable, the risk factors are within tolerance levels for all stakeholders, it's a go. If not, and we can't reassign risk to, say, the customer, it's not. I mean, you can get to the point where you spent, we've had projects where we spent in excess of $10 million just getting through the proposal stage, only to find out just before we submitted, well, this is a no-go.
Right. Right.
And you eat the 10 million.
Yeah. I remember working on it was many years ago. I was working on a conversion. It was an IT project converting records of one pension system to another pension system, and we were working with an organization, an oil company from Alberta. They were working on the oil sands and so on. And we were talking about risk as it pertained to the conversion of this pension information. And I remember the fellow from the company itself, and he lived in a world of risk where he would express it to say, when we're doing a project in the oil, the oil fields or oil sands, if there's a problem, people die. And I still remember this to this day of this man was very serious about risk because he lived in a world where it wasn't oh, there's going to be an error in the calculation and that we'll have to fix later, or the project might be a couple of weeks late and cost a little bit more than what we thought, which are all, they're not, I'm not trivializing risk, but in certain types of project there is actual harm done, like immediate harm done. And that always struck me. That's always stayed with me, the way he said people die. And I was like, oh, okay.
I didn't want to say that, but it's an understood
Yeah.
part of the reason. And this is one thing that is often a topic of discussion with engineering students. They'll complain, well, I made a mistake, but I carried it through. I should get 90% of the answer. It's like, no, because when you make an error in a calculation, people can die.
Right. Yes.
And early in my career, I actually used to investigate industrial accidents using very structured protocols for investigating it. And every one of the incidences I investigated were preventable.
Right. Right. There's a more of a direct correlation in engineering projects and engineering work, for sure. But
you think of our reliance on software now, and self-driving cars. If there's an issue in converting sensor data to actionable response with the vehicle, someone can be injured.
Yes.
And this is the one thing it's very easy to criticize, but very difficult for people to comprehend that, quality just doesn't happen. Risk is always going to be there.
Yeah.
And people want to, avoid risk at all costs, but you have to have a comfort level.
Yeah. Can you imagine being at the table at Tesla, for example? You're sitting across the table from Elon Musk, and we're talking about risk of exactly what you're saying. There are autonomous driver systems that, maybe their quality, their accuracy is 99.8%, but that 0.2% could cause an accident, which could result in death. What's acceptable? Like, that is a huge question that is not, it's not only unique to the engineering field, the medical field, and many other fields, but it's certainly front and center in engineering projects of.
Well, think about pharmaceutical and food processing too, Dave.
Yes.
Your food is 99.99% safe.
Right.
Right. But for, again, it becomes a heartfelt discussion with the organization, their core values. And unfortunately, the underwriters and lawyers get involved.
Well, yeah, financial costs of problems.
Think about the early 1970s and the exploding Ford Pintos.
I was just thinking about as you were saying 1970s.
Yeah, we're of the same vintage, Dave.
Yeah, we remember Pintos.
But
I never drove one, though. I have to say that I have not owned a Pinto.
My wife did. It was her mom's.
That's 1 degree of separation from a Pinto.
Yeah, but the thing is, at the time, Ford accepted the risk of lawsuits as being, less than the cost of the engineering redesign.
Right.
And that was a fatal mistake.
Yeah.
Because public opinion.
Right.
Really did not serve them well.
Yeah, they maybe didn't factor in the cost of the public opinion, the tarnishing of the brand, that became an example of low quality for years. It's starting to perhaps fade from public awareness, but it's taken a long time for that to occur.
Yeah, it won't happen until guys like us no longer exist.
Right.
We still remember it, right?
Right.
We're like the chroniclers of bad, and that was really bad decision making.
I know,
but it happens. I mean, I remember, hearing, an organization talk about, they make decisions, they make impactful decisions. The important thing is to learn from them and move on, not dwell on them.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned quality, which is a, kind of quality and risk can coincide or, overlap, but everything overlaps when you really come down to it. But, if there's one area of project management that I think sometimes gets lost in translation almost, is quality. And I know you've got a big extensive background in quality, and I wanted to see what your thoughts were on that of how does traditional quality management kind of integrate into projects? Because projects, things are on the go, decisions are being made. It's not a production line that we can study, and do variance diagrams, and a lot of the tools of traditional quality management uh, are taught during project management. We have a hard time implementing them on many projects. Now, maybe more on large scale infrastructure projects, maybe that's not true, but I just wanted to see what your thoughts were around quality and large projects.
It's a challenge. I mean, because a lot of times it's an afterthought. Like, something hasn't shipped. It's because quality assurance didn't allow the shipment. Well, quality assurance may not have allowed the shipment because the item, say, is made. Let's just pick a hypothetical. It's made in Georgia, southern U.S. It'll take a month to get to the border. Have to be, go through customs. Take another couple of weeks, and then another 3-4 weeks to get to destination somewhere in Ontario. Well, if the item doesn't meet spec and is released, it goes all the way to site, roughly 2 months.
Right.
Gets inspected at site, rejected, takes another 2 months, goes all the way back. Then has to get into the queue to be repaired. So if you actually, don't release it and make sure it's fixed before it ships, you may have a week or so delay, but it's better than 2-3 months, 4 months. And some of it's often hard because people keep talking about the cost of quality. And I always ended a lot of conversation with project managers that I had supervisory roles of or oversight on, said, what's the cost of not meeting requirements? And you look at a week delay versus an 8-week delay. Well, there's an 8 times factor right there.
Yeah, right. There was always an expression, I think there may have been a book written or so on, there was the expression was that quality is free. That the idea being that, like what you're saying, is it's the opposite view, or another way of saying the cost of low quality is so high, how can you afford not to do it, particularly on big things, so
Yeah, like
so
my,
it's
my,
a
my
mind.
first,
It's a
my first
mindset.
real exposure to this whole systematic stuff was when a large organization in Canada, a division of an American parent, was launched their Six Sigma program. This is mid-1990s. And the whole purpose of it was broadcast to the world as a quality initiative, when really what it was to reduce internal waste,
Mhm.
reduce costs. But it was marketed in such a way that, the rest of the world said, hey, we should do this too. Originally developed by a telecom. But, basically the philosophy was there's if you have a lot of in-process waste, it adds up over time and it cuts into your profits. And
Right.
when you start looking at systematic ways to make your processes more efficient, you end up unleashing creativity that says, hey, that spills over into product development. Not only making things better, but then, you can go to your customer, we've done some experiment and we can do this and makes the product last longer or perform better or brighter, or look at how much more vivid the color is, what have you, whatever attribute you're looking at. And that was kind of a almost a random discovery from all this huge initiative. And it was a really exciting time to be in quality. And kind of rode the coattails of that for many years, but then
Right.
we got into the C-suite.
I've always had a feeling with real life projects, not teaching it, but I mean involved in projects, is I find quality to be one of the more really interesting and exciting areas to really think about and believe in. On the other hand, I found the actual execution of quality assurance and quality control and so on. And again, no offense to any people in the quality industry that are listening to this. I always found it kind of tedious, like kind of really very structural, very dogmatic, very restrictive, and maybe that's just the nature of the beast, that when you actually implement it. But it's just I've always found I love the concept of quality, and you listen, you read folks like Deming and Dr. Uren and others, and you're just fascinated by it. But then you kind of get involved with quality and in real life, and it's kind of oof, this is but that's my personal opinion. I don't know how if that's you if you
Well,
found that, or is that just me?
I can agree and I can disagree with you. I mean, again, it depends on how the processes are designed, because if the process is designed so that everyone's like a worker drone just doing very narrow focus, or if you've got a more global perspective of overall improvement, consider traditional assembly lines to Toyota manufacturing system. Okay, completely different cross-pollination. Everyone knows about every process, etc. It gets exciting.
Right.
But regardless of the structure, the real fun happens when things go wrong. That to me was probably the most fun, is when we had problems. Like, that's when I got really excited about going into the office and saying, hey, what do we got today? Oh, we got a problem. All right, let's work our way through it and work the problem.
Yeah.
And those are always fun times, because that to me made it, that tested the robustness of your processes and your systems. It tested your ability to think on your feet. It tested your relationships with your customer and suppliers. It tested your hiring decisions with the people you worked with.
Yeah.
Because did you have a team that would run and cover, or do you have a team that stands up and puts in when something's gone horribly wrong? Right. And communications. I mean, this is one thing we haven't talked about, but communication is so important. And not just quality, risk, but project management as well. The real people who excel, they're not supervisors, they're not administrators, they're true leaders, and they really have a skill for communications. They get the messaging out there. They motivate people when times are tough. Like, I over the years, I can't count the number of Fridays, 4:00 in the afternoon, the phone call came and something went horribly wrong. And you dealt with it.
Yeah. Oh, I know. It's all communication. I want to come back to community, but I just want to go back to what you said a moment ago, because it really triggered a memory of mine, which is when you said, I love, like, came in, yeah, we got a problem. And you have the mindset needed for high quality. Because I remember early in my career, again, this is, back when I was just, a young guy out of school and in my first job, and the way quality control, and we didn't even call it quality, we call it testing, but the way testing was described is that success is finding an error, not finding zero errors. That's failure. If you're testing, if you're a tester, quality control, whatever you want to call it, to find nothing is kind of something's wrong here. You're actually looking for problems, and you go, I found one. Yeah. And
exactly.
And that was kind of, at the time, was kind of mind blowing, because it totally shifted my outlook to say, oh, once I do that, I'm going to start turning over stones and seeing what's under it, as opposed to just going, oh, it looks fine. Everything's, yep, no problems. I guess everything's okay. Versus, let's put this thing through its paces. Let's try to break it.
Yeah, that's fun.
When you try to break things, that's fun. And then you break it, and then you say, got it. I knew it was there. We fixed it. And that's the really exciting part about quality. Like, that's getting the fun back in quality. So I like the fact that you were lucky, you liked problems when you found them.
Yeah, to me, it's the two areas of real enjoyment are building new systems, like creating things from scratch, updating, revising, improving. That long-term, scanning the horizon, looking for ways to make things better for everyone. The mistake proofing. I think the term poka-yoke is the Kaizen term for it. Or when things go horribly wrong. Yeah. The middle of the road is routine.
Yeah. Oh, I know. It's on the, on the edges where things happen. You've mentioned a few different areas of project management so far. You mentioned risk. You've mentioned quality, communication, which I absolutely agree with. That you have to be a communicator. To really excel in managing projects and so on, you've got to be able to write and verbalize. You know, this is almost, if you were stuck on a deserted island and could only take one area of project management with you, which one would you take? I mean, which one do you think which one is the best, is the most important? Again, impossible question, but
Wow.
what is the one that you could not do without? I know it's you, and you could say that's I'm not saying. What do you think?
I would take the importance of relationships.
Yeah.
Because hopefully there'd be someone who would realize I was missing and, organize a search team to try and find me. Because, the most wonderful thing, I learned from going from, administration, management to leadership is the most wonderful thing about managing people is the people. The most challenging thing is the people.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're complex beasts. To me, that fundamentally, if you're not a good person and you're not surrounded by good people, you're not going to succeed. And you can think you're as smart as you want to think you are, but if other people look at you and go, "You're an idiot," your career's not going to go very far.
Yeah, I agree with you on, and as you were describing it, I was thinking that's right, because if you have those relationships, that stakeholder engagement, the rest follows from there. The rest, if you don't have it, you can be the best risk manager in the world, you can be the best scheduler, you could be the best budget person, but if you don't have those relationships, it's not going to take. You're not going to be able to communicate it effectively. It'll be, it's kind of like it'll bounce off and bounce back to you. So, I do think, and that's one of the things that I have, been involved in the teaching and so on, is that this is the one that kind of rules them all. If you don't have that, you're dead in the water.
Trust.
Yeah.
Honesty, integrity, and trust. They're real foundations. I mean, I sound like a really old-fashioned guy when I talk about that, but if you don't inspire trust in those around you,
I know.
They just don't like you. I mean,
yeah, teams won't, people won't collaborate with you. Teams won't do work for you. They won't follow you. They won't be motivated by you. Customers will be suspicious of you, if you don't have that trust. But, that's where it takes a while to earn trust. You have to be pretty, there's a lot of things there's a lot of ways you can it can take a while to build trust. It can be very fast to lose it. Like you can
instantaneously.
It's gone.
It take a lifetime to build trust, and then one really inappropriate situation and it's gone.
There's something in your background, like what I wanted to just ask you, what is it like in a project like that? And it's the word working in military applications, projects, and so on. That's something that, maybe a lot of people have not had involvement in there. And what is it like? Is it just another project that people are wearing uniforms, or do you find it different?
Both. I find in the private sector, excuses are rampant. Well, I couldn't get this done, or I'm not going to meet my deadline. When you're dealing with, international military agencies, when there's a commitment made, it's delivered.
Right.
I mean, their leadership development is amazing.
Yeah.
The psych profiling that people go through, they weed out the, sociopaths and the psychopaths, and you've really got to be a leader. You've got to be a nurturer of those around you. You've got to take charge, because in a combat situation you could be relying on each other to stay alive.
Right.
And when a commitment is made and a project schedule is adopted, there's no slippage. And if there is, it's usually on the private sector side, the supplier side, because again, there's that commitment to doing it. But I always found those projects to be probably the most enjoyable to work on.
Yeah.
I found that technologically they were incredibly advanced and super cool as an engineer. But as far as the administration and management, they ran smoothly.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you know, it was a true joy. And the cool thing is, if you're going to be on station, say on a naval vessel, you have to, as a rep, go through certain specific training, because you're not just going to be cargo. You're going to have to participate. If there is an emergency,
Right.
you will have to help with dealing with that emergency.
Yeah.
And that led to some really, really exciting and interesting opportunities. You know, being a first aid provider, at one time I was almost like a first responder paramedic qualified. And of course that, you know, meant that I would be doing certain things if I was on station. But I just found things just, you know, you're working with some exciting stuff, and it's not all about the let's blow things up. You know, when you look at water treatment and a lot of the systems that we take for granted, communications and that all kind of evolved from the aerospace industry.
Mhm.
And you know, I think about portable water treatment plants, you know, setting those up, you know, for humanitarian efforts that were deployed by UN forces. That's kind of I did something good here project, you know.
Right.
It can really help, like hurricane relief efforts, or Haiti's having issues again.
Mhm.
I mean, people need shelter.
Right.
You know, a lot of the advances we're seeing in AI are coming out of DARPA right now.
Right. Yes. A
Um,
lot of technology and other, like you say, engineering innovations. Well, much of project management, if you go back through the history of modern project management, a lot of it was developed during military projects, like
wartime
development
effort.
of the nuclear submarines and so on. A lot of that was you know, the scheduling techniques and you know, project management came out of military projects. How do you find, like, when you say military, you know, the term chain of command, I think, originated in the military,
Yeah.
that concept. How do you find communication in um, in those types of projects? Were you sort of prevented from communicating as effectively because of chain of command, or do you think that was just something that, you know, was positive or negative or neutral?
Well, it's not like in the movies.
Yeah.
It's not all
Movies
serious. Sir,
aren't true. What?
I've given my orders. Do you understand? Yes, I understand. No, there's a lot of dialogue and
Yeah.
engagement. We want to make sure that like any mission deployment would there be a briefing and a pretty much a speak freely questions and answers to make sure all risks were addressed. On the project side, it's like, okay, this is what we have to accomplish.
Mhm.
Very regular and frequent meetings. One of the coolest projects I worked on was the decommissioning of an installation's refuse facility, and we found some kind of interesting artifacts. But again, the communications were very clear, very relaxed. It wasn't all stiff upper shirts. I mean, my dog had a security tag so he could attend the meetings by video conference. I mean, um, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about some of the projects that, you know, private sector gets to work with you know, the complex, um, and that's unfortunate. It's really a lack of awareness. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, I enjoyed it. I had a really good time. I mean, I don't know what else to say, Dave. I mean,
Well, at the end of the day, you know, projects are, you know, the common element between projects of different types is that people work on them, you know, and people are, you know, in some ways very similar across different project types, and that's sort of the common element that comes back to the, you were saying, relationships and stakeholders. So yeah, like what you were saying, it's not like in the movies where, you know, you know, a general walks in the room, barks out orders, and everybody scurries away and does them. Like, you know, what you're saying is, no, there's dialogue, there's discussion, there's free flow of ideas and so on, which is normal or desirable in projects in general. Like that's what you'd strive for, is to have that. So that's good to know.
yeah, I found it to be in another way, another issue. I found a lot more efficient in just executing. You know, the term I use throughout a lot is busy work. You know, in elementary school, we were given an assignment, write a 3-paragraph story, and you lose marks because you didn't underline the title with 3 different colors ink. The assignment was to write a 3-paragraph story,
Right.
not the busy work of using different color pens.
Right. Right.
So, execution, focus on task.
Yes.
Busy work, well, put in some useless features.
I would think, again, I've never been in the military, but I would think they would be quite familiar with the concept or the words of what is the mission involved. And that would become, and that's what you're saying, what's the objective? What are we trying to accomplish? So that would be something that would be very familiar with anyone in that organization.
And the thing that, in looking at, the ecosystem locally, we've got the startup community where you've got, start up about 5 or 6 people, and they get to about 60. There's a change in behavior. Get to 120. There's a change in behavior. Get to around, 200. There's another change in behavior. Splinter groups, polarization. But when you get an organization like, an armed service, there is a constant behavior. There is one objective.
Right.
And you move towards it. And that is the challenge that a lot of organizations face. And to me, that goes to the relationships and the leadership. There's something not quite right that causes this to happen. And, that's a tough one. That's a tough nut to crack. But again, it's, I've been a little fortunate that I've been surrounded by really good people. And one of the coolest things early in my career was, I was a junior engineer, and the desk right next to me was, a chap who'd been working for 30 years, and he pick their brain.
Yeah. Go
out into the field and pick their brain. And, the knowledge that was transferred was just, those afternoons were just amazing.
Right. Is what you're describing just now, are you describing sometimes the things that can happen to organizations when they get too big, that they start to lose their way? Is that what you were sort of referring to?
Yeah, and that happens with projects as well.
Yeah.
Larger projects get, the more waste you will see in time and resources.
Start to see kind of mission creep, or they lose their way. They start to, in politics starts taking over. I recall watching a video of Steve Jobs sometime during his career, where he described his objective at Apple was that every team would feel, every group of people would feel like a team, like a small team working within a large company. That they wanted to keep that, local feeling within Apple teams, and not get into the environment where you just say, well, geez, I'm part of this monolithic, multinational company. What effect do I have? What can I do? I'm just part of this, 30,000 or 50,000 person organization. I'll just put in my 8 hours and call it a day. That he was consciously trying to have the organization be sort of thought of and felt like it's a large number of smaller teams that could do things. And I think, that when you said that reminded me of his philosophy. And again, you see the performance of Apple and under his leadership did very well.
And it continues to do well because that same approach exists. Right. And that's really important. Like when you get a small group of people working very tightly, but they know that they are contributing to the overall good.
Right.
That's a huge difference from I'm one of 1,000.
Right.
If you're in a team of, say, 20 people, but you're contributing to something that's going to be, and there are many moving pieces to make this product, but each team is doing something that will advance the mission or the objective of the organization, the product innovation. I mean, that's an amazing thing to watch and be part of. And one of the things that they were really good at was communicating. Like you weren't just designing keyboards came under criticism lately. You weren't just designing a keyboard to replace. You were designing the next innovation in the MacBooks or whatever. Right. It wasn't just a keyboard. It was the ecosystem. And one of the things that they're an amazing systems integrator. Like just how flawlessly, when I remember I was looking at another brand, locally produced, a phone, but I realized, well, if I held out and got, my first iPhone was a 3G. I had on my PDA, I had my music, I had my phone, I had text, I had everything all in one device.
Yeah.
And the subscription fee was, half what the other brand was. And so what did I go with?
Yeah.
And I look at stuff around my house. Like I'm a Mac guy, even though I work in engineering. My MacBook Pro runs dual mode Mac OS and Windows.
Yeah.
But from a systems integration perspective, anytime I need to do something, it's like so intuitive. And that's part of that. And you can see that they obviously have spent a lot of time thinking and making sure the execution is going to be effective. And that goes back to their teamwork.
Yeah. Oh, I know. I've often thought of that organization, and there'll be others, but that organization very much marries design and execution. We can talk about the elegance of the product and how well it's designed and so on, which is great, but they also execute well. It's not one at the expense of the other. So if you can do those, if you can design and integrate and have great engineering, but you can also make it come to market, that's what you're trying to do. I mean, that's an objective for projects and organizations, for sure.
Yeah, whenever I'm asked, describe to me an organization that you have the utmost respect for in engineering, I will say Lego.
Cool. I wasn't expecting you to say Lego. Why is that?
Think about the brick, the elements that they have, and how many ways they can be put together to look like realistic devices and systems.
Right.
They've got their Technique supercars with paddle shifters inside with working transmissions.
Right.
But they're also on the education side. The MIT Innovation Lab, they've been funding that since the 80s.
Right.
And Scratch and other languages that we use now were developed by Lego. And so when you look at product design, just the integration of all those elements and how they design things and how robust they are for child play, or as an adult fan of Lego, I'll admit, it's a great escape, a great stress relief to just kind of sit back and say, what can I do with this today? And IKEA would be my second choice for good engineering. But again, a lot of their success, Dave, goes to the projects and how they manage and launch the product development. Sorry.
I know it's good to have ideas and thoughts, but if you can't implement them, that's where projects comes in, project managers, etc. So anyways, Don, this has been a great discussion. We've gone from I was just thinking, we've gone from nuclear and military projects to Lego. So we've got a broad range, and I don't mean that. I mean that in the best possible way. Lego is a great company, but we've gone sort of across the board in projects. So thanks for the great discussion. It's been a pleasure talking with you today.
Absolute pleasure being here, Dave.
All right, we'll talk to you again soon.